second nature to me at this point.
Me and Trini, I'm sorry, I just completely made this conversation go away from the point.
No, it's all good. I'm done. I was just ranting.
Degenerate is what you did.
But no, me and Trini were laughing the other day about Cross. He debated Destiny on veganism, and then just in the middle of it, Cross randomly just says, This is exactly what happened with Wade. When no one in the fucking server knows who Wade is or anything.
What the fuck, dude?
Right, he sounded schizophrenic. I need more Cross, though. I wonder where he is.
He's off being Cross somewhere else.
He has a book, apparently.
He does not.
He does. It's on Amazon.
You're lying to me.
I don't lie.
Stacy, link.
Sure, hold on. Let me find it.
I can't believe what you're saying to me right now. Jamie, apparently Cross has written a book. I don't know.
Alright.
Jamie asked if the book soon. Very soon. Very soon. It's an answer enough.
I'm sorry I missed all that.
It's not okay, classes.
You will be sorry, is the correct response.
Should be.
I think what I said was also fine.
Be held accountable for saying sorry.
Alright, hold on. I'll definitely find it sometime, though, because it's in one of the servers.
Stacey, now I'm disappointed.
Well, I am too, but I didn't, save it or anything.
Why not, though?
I don't know. Hold on. Well, it might be in my DMs, actually.
Fuck.
Because I was going to buy it. It's
his new strategy.
He
DMs Cross's book to girls, and that's how he gets his W's.
You guys are making me doing a lot of work to prove that I'm not full of shit.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think you probably are full of shit, Stacey. This is you we're talking about.
Well, I am, but not with this though.
I mean, Stacey, given what you've told us about your W's and your L's, why should we trust you? You know?
Am I right?
Ladies.
This kid over here has no idea what a W is.
I have plenty. I think I know what I'm talking about. I have to give them away because I can't even fit all of them in my pocket.
I've literally never
seen
you take a W home.
Dude, it's like change. I can only hold so much in my pocket. I eventually have to give it away.
I've literally never seen you take a W home.
It's like
these are literal lies.
It's like change. It's not relevant anymore.
It builds up to something. It builds up to a big W. which is the W of the day.
Is that how you spell delusion?
It's the W of being the class clown, maybe.
No, it's the W of I got so many W's, and that's what I wanted that day. So that's the small W's make up the bigger W. Of winning the day.
Is that how kids spell delusion these days? Good to know.
That's what apparently. Stacey over here thinks that having no women is having all the women.
Can I just clarify that you guys keep bringing this up and not me?
Yeah, because it's humorous. It's so funny. I like to laugh.
Can I just clarify that you probably have a girlfriend by now if you weren't such a bag?
Oh, he's fucking got you there.
Just saying.
Serrano, what do you have?
But that's not what I desire, though.
Why do you have to destroy Stacey over here?
I'm just saying.
How's your arts major going?
Bye.
Pretty good, dude.
Go away. Else for work. Someone else left. Hi,
Oh, hello.
Hello, fellow moderator.
It's really hot, dude. Fuck.
So, if you're gonna make comments like that, I'm gonna have to strip you of your rank.
Sorry. To be fair though, did you know that even though it's like a BuzzFeed test, me and Ava got the highest scores on the IQ test.
Yeah.
X.
I can't believe you didn't get the one for
Fucking
England,
shit.
Zerato.
I would, for the England thing, I was there for a good 4 minutes, like writing it out.
I can't believe you didn't get England, but you got all the numbers.
I was like, an animal? No.
I just guessed on that one.
I'm sure.
Who the fuck sings on
I
a
couldn't figure
skateboard?
that out.
What the fuck? There's a guy on a skateboard just singing, like, really loud on the street.
That sounds like Chris.
Sounds like he's having a good time.
It's too hot for someone to be that happy.
That is exactly the sort of thing Chris would do.
Maybe it's Chris. Did you find it, Stacy?
Oh, it's fine.
No, I asked for it again.
Nice.
Hey, Clam, how you doing?
Are you guys gonna buy it?
Literally playing CS:GO right now.
No. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself. I'll be back in a bit.
Okay, goodbye.
Alright. Yeah, I'm probably gonna buy the book though.
What book?
Cross's book.
Who's Cross?
Cross wrote a book.
He's like one of the most profound intellectuals. Shut up. Yeah, like I've already said this multiple times and they've been asking for it.
Who the fuck is Cross, bro?
He's one of the greatest intellectuals of this generation.
That doesn't give me a whole lot of information about him.
It gives you all the information you need, though.
He's a Discord celebrity.
I love that.
Oh, Cross! Yeah, I know this guy.
Yeah, the steel manning machine.
Clem's like, I love CrossFit.
No, I've never talked to him. I've heard of his name because he was on Nameless for a while, apparently.
Yeah, I think he left after a couple of debates.
NSYNC bullied him so much. It was really sad.
Oof.
That sucks.
Alright, so minor segue. By the way, NSYNC, you gotta link me to your paper again. I was actually thinking about that earlier. I gotta read that damn thing.
No, just wait for me.
No, you cut out there. I didn't hear that.
I said just wait for my rewrite.
Oh, you're coming out with a second edition?
Just wait till it gets accepted and put in textbooks.
Well, imagine if it's published, it's been peer reviewed, right? Like this isn't this like your master's or your PhD thesis?
Yeah, but the formatting of the first version is such that I couldn't get it published, so that's why I'm rewriting it.
Ah, okay. Well, let me know when that's done.
First version is very confusingly written because I was still a bit unwell when I wrote it down. But since then, like a lot of work, like formalizing it in argument and stuff like that. So the new version is like a lot more, it's a lot more comprehensible to someone who doesn't know what the fuck I'm talking about to begin with.
Yeah, but I feel like I get that, yeah. I could probably handle it, though.
I mean, I'll send you the old version, but I guarantee you'll just tell me that I like some shit that you didn't know what was going on.
No, so I understand that inclination, so out of respect for for yourself, I'll wait for the updated version. Because you would prefer to present that one.
Yeah.
I hate it's like showing somebody like a song or a video or something like before you're finished producing it. You're like, no, like it's not done yet. You can't take this properly. Like,
yeah.
All the insecurities surrounding it because you could sit there and you could critique it yourself better than anybody else. So it's like when someone critiques it, you're like, yeah, no, I got to fix that first. Like,
yeah. And a big part of it as well is that like. like what is written down is like it's me like really struggling to get the idea outside of my head in a way that was understandable to anybody, but because it was the first attempt of that I haven't really updated since then, and that was like 2 years ago. Like my ability to get it across with words has like improved like a lot since I first wrote it down.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. I've been reading more philosophy lately.
Oh yeah.
Not too deep, but I've just been trying to get more of like the 101 shit down.
Have you read The Last Days of Socrates, dude?
No.
Oh my god.
I've read so I have the Apology of Socrates on the fucking desk behind me. So we did in university, we did his Apology, and then we did Plato. So I do constantly reference Socrates in regards to Plato, but I haven't actually read that much Socrates. I just read all the people who wrote shit about him.
Socrates never wrote anything.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Didn't he not actually? Okay, so I've
He hated writing.
Yeah, so I've read good chunks of his students.
Apology is one of the books of The Last Days of Socrates.
Oh, okay.
Isn't that like
that was his trial speech, right?
Yeah.
Didn't they adapt into a play?
I don't think so. Yeah, so like he the Last Days of Socrates is about, he goes to court and he has a very interesting discussion with a guy about the nature of virtue.
Yeah.
And piety, rather specifically, is what it is. And he asks one of the most fascinating questions I've ever seen asked a religious person, which is what is good loved by God because it is good, or is it good because it is loved by God? Because those are very different things, right?
I love that question so much.
So good, dude. And because the Greek gods were many, there wasn't just one of them, it leads to some contradictions. It doesn't matter which one you say, both of them are contradictory. And so it's the first book is like Socrates demonstrating to this guy at court, he's bringing his father there for killing a slave. So he's bringing his father to court for manslaughter, and that's really against the customs of the time to take your father to court over the death of some peasant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he's I know God's law so well that I'm willing to prosecute my father in court for this. And Socrates just sort of embarrasses him about the fact that he doesn't really know what he's talking about by just asking him questions and leading him to the conclusion that he's not making sense.
Oh,
Isn't that why we derived the Socratic method?
That is.
Yeah, that is. But what I'm thinking about there is that you can generally use somebody's. Holy crap! I get so much feedback from your microphone. You can generally use somebody's morality against them if you're going to make a value judgment towards anything. But isn't that going into absurdism? Does that have anything to do with the ideas of absurdism?
No, because all Socrates was saying...
nihilist, then you don't have to worry about that.
So all Socrates was saying was that Socrates was the first person to point out that there were lots of people who seemed to know a great deal about a particular subject, but he went around, his story is, that the oracle at Delphi told him that he was the wisest man in the world. And he was like, no way. And so he went around questioning other people about their knowledge. And what he found was that no matter how much someone knew, at the bottom of all their knowledge, they didn't know anything about how their knowledge worked. They didn't know how to tell if they actually knew or not. They couldn't tell what they didn't know, you know what I mean? And so he concluded that everybody was ignorant. And that's what he's demonstrating here. He's not demonstrating that it's absurd. He's demonstrating that the other person doesn't know what they claim to know.
In sync, are you jogging? Or are you just really into the Socrates stuff? You're just oh, Socrates. Oh.
I'm pacing.
Called it.
Okay, so what were you about to say, Clam? I didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah, so Just be a moral nihilist. You don't have to worry about morals then.
Well, yeah, but for some of us, that's an accurate answer.
No, I'm joking.
I know you are. I was just taking the piss out of the joke.
You're fucking horrible if you do that. You're the most worthless person in society.
Look, it's not my fault I'm over here playing 2D chess on your ass, alright?
I'm playing 4D chess. Get on my
No, you're clearly only...
chess?
No, you're clearly only playing one-dimensional. You're playing checkers or something, because I just 2D'd you. Wasn't even that hard.
Checkers is two-dimensional, you bum.
That's the point of the statement, Bridge. Come on. It wasn't supposed to make sense. That's alright. It doesn't matter.
I don't like jokes that don't make sense.
Doesn't matter if other people find me funny. I think I'm fucking hilarious.
You know who else doesn't like jokes that don't make sense? Your mom.
See? That made me chuckle deep down. I love your mom jokes. Reminds me of battle rap.
Are your mom jokes common in battle rap?
I guess they were in the 90s.
I didn't really look into a lot of battle rap.
Different time.
Yeah.
Hey, Clam.
Hey, what's up, Colin?
Much.
That's cool.
Been a while.
Yeah, it has.
Still keeping it weird?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Still keeping it weird?
Still keeping it weird. There's gotta be, like, a way to make, like, a better Discord. Like, Discord, but better.
Dude, Discord's already pretty sick. Shut your heathen mouth.
No, Discord's pretty cool, but I wish there was just some features that, did.
I feel like...
You know you can modify Discord.
Sorry.
It's illegal. It's, like, very illegal. Discord
illegal.
and
It's against the terms of service. It's not fucking illegal, Clem.
Violating the terms of service is sometimes illegal.
This is not illegal.
Well, it's not a criminal thing. It's like a thing they sue you over or whatever.
Yeah. It's like...
Did he just go from this is very illegal to, well, I mean, like, sometimes it can be illegal?
I don't know, dude. I'd just rather not chance my Discord account being fucked.
Weren't you just talking shit about Discord? Stay consistent, Clem.
But yeah, I use it. Doesn't mean I don't have to like it.
Doesn't mean you don't have to like what?
So if I use the service, am I obliged to like it?
We use the double negative though.
Oh, fair enough. Sorry.
Excellent recovery, Clem.
Whatever.
Well, I was actually being serious. Whatever.
Yeah, but then he one-upped it with feigned disinterest to the overall conversation. He's too cool for the school.
I don't think that was a really good recovery, but sure.
No,
It was an amazing recovery.
Just finally made it over to 3D chess over there.
You can make like Discord bots and stuff, right? Like, for example, I'm working on a bot that's going to track the number of days since I've asked for existentialism to be a role.
Is it really not a role? You could win me in on that one.
No, it's not. I put it in suggestions like 2 weeks ago.
InSync, can you explain to me why existentialism is not a role? Wait, isn't there a existential nihilism?
Existential nihilism is a role, but not existentialism. Absurdism is a role, but not existentialism. Absurdism is like less committed existentialism.
So I'll consciously or I'll honestly admit that I'm probably not apt enough in the official like definition kind of academic study of philosophy to know what your concern is. So, InSync, is there a reason, or can you explain to me, Bridge, why you would need the clear distinction?
Existential nihilism just means that there's no point to existence. Existentialism is saying, okay, there is no point to existence, but let's make one anyway.
There is no point to existence sounds like a positive claim. How can somebody defend that claim?
Usually some appeal to science and atoms and stuff.
It's like the humanist papers.
Well, I usually hear it as an appeal to an infinite regression that you cannot know properly. You know, I usually hear epistemological nihilism underneath existential nihilism.
That your human brain will never have the capacity to understand its vision. That assumes that there is no transhumanism in our future. That's a very bold assumption.
Well, I mean, I'm not a nihilist.
You know what's strange about existential nihilists? Because they're existential nihilists, they have no such.
Real quick. I thought I was following this conversation for 1 second. Please define existentialism in this context. I understand nihilism, but
Existentialism starts with existential nihilism, so like the claim that, okay, we have no purpose for our existence. And existentialism says, okay, well, let's explore why we need why we would want a purpose and how we would make our own.
Okay, so if you remove the nihilism, what does existentialism mean on its own?
Existential by itself is what I said.
And so why do we need a purpose?
Yeah, well, so, why do we need a purpose? Why do we want a purpose? And how can we make a purpose? Or meaning, or whatever you want to say.
Okay, sorry, Tenant, I follow it now.
No problem, I was just poking fun at the idea of... I don't know if it's existentialism, but existential nihilism definitely has a flaw in my opinion. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's also a positive claim. And I don't understand when, relativists make positive claims. To me, that's very shocking.
So, Insync, can you explain what you mean by it's an infinite regression? Like regression to the mean, I'm guessing is what you're referring to?
No. So, often existential nihilism, like I said, is underlined by epistemological nihilism, which an argument for which goes like this, give me an example of something you know.
Sorry, is epistemological nihilism similar to absurdism?
No.
No.
Absurdism is the idea that reality is there's no actual order to it. It's just actually absurd. Yeah. So fine.
So it doesn't.
Can you see any objects around you?
Yeah, I can see the moon from my
I've got a wine glass.
Okay. Yeah. How do you know that it's actually there?
I'm using empiricism, my five senses, to interpret this wine glass.
How do you know that those are representative way to explore the world?
I don't. They can all be tricked. They've all been tricked on me before. I felt things that weren't really there. I've
okay,
seen things that weren't really there. I've heard things that weren't really there.
So then, is it possible for you to really know anything?
No, not necessarily. That's where intersubjective consensus comes in.
Okay, so then the epistemological nihilist says it is necessarily not possible for you to know anything.
That's true. We could all have a mass hallucination and be interpreting an object that's not actually there. Once again, you've heard me make this joke. When I turn out my lights and leave my kitchen, is my fridge still there? Please answer this question for me.
No,
obviously.
Wait. How do they deal with the idea that you can create an instrument, a measurement instrument, that will record this, and the information will exist within that instrument for everybody to discover?
But you still need a brain to interpret that data.
Yeah, and humans still have to build it.
Mm-hmm.
So no, but my argument. I've heard this argument. I understand this argument, and the general next approach is why I dispel most of the religious arguments, because their way of filling this gap, as it were, is through this sixth sense, as I like to call it. They refer to it as revelation. And it's
good old revelation.
Yeah, right. So it's like they're picking up some TV station that I don't get. Right. We all deal with scent, touch, taste. We deal with and then yes, I get from an epistemological approach. There's also rationalism, right? That's the counter, is that you can actually, without independently of the data, you can rationalize the existence of something.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is there are a couple of other modes of perception. You can have intuitions that things are true, and you can have rational justifications for things being true.
What's that referred to as?
What, an intuition?
Intuitionism, or like?
No.
Is there a
That's
school of thought for it, or?
No. Intuitionism is a type of logic, but it's not really based on that. It's based on intuitions, but it's not based on the idea of an intuition. No, an intuition is something you have where you have an intimation of what you think is true based on some scattered data that you don't know how to articulately identify, right? But you sort of have some sort of partial awareness that there's a pattern. That's an intuition.
Is there a difference between intuition and common sense? Because I feel like most people would just say, "Well,
definitely
it's common sense."
No, yeah, definitely. That's a common sense in air quotes thing to say, right? Intuition
I would never make an argument for rationalizing reality around intuition, because I feel like it's just opened up to be poked full of holes.
Of course, intuition is unreliable, right?
Completely.
But the thing is that when you get to the bottom of things, though, we often confirm rational intuitions because that is what's guiding us towards the truth most of the time, right? And so, even though intuition is unreliable, intuition gives you good information about where to look next.
Yeah, you're kind of like steering a ship, and you see glimpses of the stars, and you correct your course as you go. Now, on any given moment, your course is wrong, but over the passage of time, you're moving towards a general direction that you can detect. And that direction will never gets confirmed, but it gets updated constantly.
That was a very good analogy, Tennant.
Hi, guys.
Can you reframe?
Good afternoon.
Hey, how's it going, Frank?
Hey.
Sorry, Tennant. I feel like a dick. Can you rephrase that? Say that one more time.
Yeah. Imagine that you're the navigator on the ship when it's cloudy and you're getting glimpses of the stars, right? You're getting confirmations here and there. And every time you do, you get a new info, you correct your course. But you're never fully sure where you are, and your course is on any given moment going to be wrong. You're going in the wrong direction. However, on average, over the passage of time, you're going to be generally moving in a certain direction. You're never going to be able to confirm until the fog clears that you're actually heading towards where you want to head, let's say. But you're going to approach that vector, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
If you can imagine an infinite approach as a function. So
sorry, shit. This might be my misunderstanding of the more complex terms. But what do you mean by an infinite approach as a function?
It's imagine if you have do you know the mathematical approach towards a number?
I'm shit at math.
How it graphs.
Yeah. It's
like a line that's almost there are functions that almost reach a certain number. They have a number that they approach, but they can never reach it. And so these concepts help you understand how when you pursue truth, you can sometimes you can approach it, but the next step becomes incrementally difficult. But also, when you zoom in on your progress, every time you zoom in, you increase the scale, you see that you're repeating the same curve.
So in the idea of that ship captain metaphor, you're interpreting as much data as you possibly can at the given moment to predict and crunch into what the result is going to be, but you can't actually know what that will be until the data has played itself out.
Yeah, because the system is the assumption is that because of either shifting airs or currents, the situation you cannot accurately compute it. So you get to update it every time you get a glimpse of something that gets verified. But you can definitely make predictions.
So this makes me think. I'm sorry.
Specifically, just to link to what I said. To extend Tennant's analogy a little bit, as you're updating it, an intuition would be sort of detection that you might be going off course based on a couple of things you've seen that you couldn't quite identify. You're not sure what stars you were seeing, but something tells you you're seeing a partial pattern, right? And you think you might be going off course a little bit. That's like an intuition.
May I verify my understanding? Do you mean that if you are on the boat, whether the compass is accurate or not, I mean, you're not sure about it. I mean, but having a compass, whether it's the worst one in the world, is better than having no compass, right?
No, that wasn't the point.
Well, we kind of don't have a compass. We don't have anything that, or like in this analogy, we won't have one that's accurate.
Well, yeah,
we basically don't have one. We're making predictions based on whenever we see even if we have a compass or whatever reading we take, right? The reading changes. So the compass works today at like 12 o'clock, but it might not work for the next 24 hours. So for 24 hours, we don't know whether the currents or the wind has slightly adjusted their course. And so we're going off course. And what Insig is saying is that you might kind of feel you might not fully understand what's going on, but you interpret some signals and make a prediction. So make a probabilistic prediction of whether you're going off course or not.
So, okay, interesting. This intuitive idea. So I've only ever looked at, when it comes to epistemology, like I said, I've only ever seen the two frameworks, the idea of empiricism and then I guess some form of rationalism and then whatever the Christians call their version, but or revelationism. When it comes to this, I get into the thought experiment. I don't know what the actual framing of it is from what we were taught in fucking university or whatever, but I call it the God computer. If you had enough data about the existing universe at a snapshot in time, and then you knew enough about how molecules and physics and everything worked and played out, and you could calculate enough variables with enough computing power, you could theoretically predict, until the end of time. As we
definitely. Don't call it the God computer.
What is that thought experiment referred to as in mainstream thought?
I mean, I think that's just a perfect simulation, right?
It's a perfect simulation. Here's the problem, and I was going to get to that actually.
I feel like the God computer is a good name.
The perfect simulation is a better name, and this is actually a very interesting name. When you've done all of that, you can approach this solution in two ways. Either you figured out a compression algorithm for the universe, meaning you can predict the entire universe, any given point.
Compression algorithm for the universe.
No, it's very important.
That's true. That's a great way.
It's because the alternative is if you don't have a compression algorithm, meaning there's no universal theory of nature that can be reconciled. If there's still if you don't have that, then what you're doing is you're recreating a universe. Your perfect simulation is either some level of compression or it's a copy of a universe.
Okay.
So
bring your subscription for WinRAR.
Sounds like a good Bitcoin rig.
Think about
this guy is such a fucking language barrier, dude.
Think of it this way.
No,
it's alright. He's doing good though. He's doing good.
We started talking about.
You don't understand me.
We started talking about not being able to confirm what we see. And,
so the conversation kind of grew out of me. So I have a very
I don't wait classless.
All right.
Empiricism and rationalism are like types of epistemology. Intuition isn't. Intuition is like I asked you about the senses, right? Intuition was like another way to perceive the world, right? You can rationalize your understanding, which is an attempt to justify it logically, or you can just say, I feel that this is true, which is an intuition. You can't explain it exactly, but you have like some sort of intimation that it's the case.
Okay, so I feel like I wouldn't make a claim like that if I didn't have at least some empirical basis. Like even if
but here's the thing.
It might be an appeal to
I agree.
anecdote.
No, I agree with you. But the thing is that, you have to understand, intuitions are unreliable, sure, right? But like I said, they give you good information about, if you're going in the right direction. They help you to orient your curiosity properly. Because intuitions give very broad and general information, right? And so, for instance, you can have, people have intuitions that a weather event is going to happen sometimes, and it's a similar sort of thing. They can detect some of the signs without knowing what they're detecting, right? It's for instance, Like a lot of dogs have been barking
I was
or
just about
howling
to
and
say,
stuff
like,
like that.
dogs
It's like,
responding.
yeah,
to
but you
tornadoes.
don't have to. You don't have to consciously notice that that's what's happening, right? You can just link these things up subconsciously, and then
Okay,
say, "Hey,
so-
I think we might be having a weather event soon," and then confirm that with some
But-
sort of like weather prediction.
But when we make that argument, like for example, into a dog, can't we make the argument that that's a biological function, right? The dog's
No, but
not
the point
doing
that I'm making is that you, like, noticing that there have been a lot of dogs barking, right? That may not be conscious, and that's my point. Is that you collect pieces of information that you don't necessarily consciously identify, and then when you put them together into partial patterns that you don't understand how to articulate properly, that's an intuition, right? You can say,
Okay.
"I have a bad feeling." I have a bad feeling. That's an intuition. I
And
think
this
something's
is-
going to go wrong, and
this
it's
is-
like.
This is why, like you said, it's important to intuition can guide your, what did you refer to it as? It can guide your curiosity.
It can guide. Yeah, exactly.
So it can't actually provide you with any knowledge, but it can help you, give you the right area.
Well, it directs you to where the knowledge is, and then you have to excavate it with your rationality.
That's why philosophers say the I feel thing all the time.
Well, I try not to say I feel.
The other thing is that if you think about this
if
idea
you're
that
making a prescriptive versus a normative statement, right? I hear a lot of philosophers say when they're going to go ahead and make something prescriptive, they always say I feel beforehand.
Well, I think that's useful in interpersonal relationships. It's not that useful when you're making claims.
Yeah, that's basically that's a manifestation of cowardice.
No, like I can understand why someone would do it in an interpersonal relationship, because sometimes it can just be really aggressive just to say you are doing this and that instead of like this is how I feel you're acting, you know what I mean? But in like an argument or a debate or a discussion of ideas, you shouldn't be saying like I feel this is the case. You should be saying I think this is true. This is what I think is fucking actually going on. It's not like my feelings on the matter. And like I have an objection specifically to people saying like that you're just telling me your feelings, because what they think, what they mean, that's it, like conflates two ideas, right? There's like the liberal snowflake who is literally just complaining that their feelings are hurt, and then there's another type of person who isn't justifying themselves properly but is relying on a sort of intuition, right? And saying you're just using your feelings isn't quite accurate, right? It's like you are just using your intuition to sort of like guess rationally, to make a rational guess at what's true. But because intuition is unreliable, I don't accept that. But when you say to someone like that, you're just telling me your feelings, they're like, this is not an emotional thing. You know what I mean? Like this is not, it may not be well grounded, but it's not emotionally based as far as they can tell. You know what I mean?
So I can actually think of a perfect example of this that's come up recently in a conversation I had, and I'm not 100% sure. Okay, it's controversial, maybe, whatever. But the idea that somebody put forth the idea that a group of men will change their behavior when a woman is introduced into the social. And when called upon it, I don't have any study. I don't have any data to back anything up. But the moment I heard that statement, I was like, I just looked at it and went, well, yeah, of course. That's a given.
That's called intuitively true.
Yeah. Okay. Because I've
like it's like obviously it is self-evident, and it's like you can say like
is that the same as
how would you even qualify it?
Is that the same as like axiom or presuppositional?
No. You're saying like you have evidence for it, but the evidence is like the evidence is such that you need not say anything, because to spell the fact that there are you know what I mean? That men instinctively, as soon as they're introduced into a social dynamic, is to sort of like look for the bits of the social interaction that you have never bothered to articulate before and try to say them, which is actually quite difficult, even if it is actually very obvious.
That's not axiomatic?
No, because it's like, it's observational, right? You're saying like, you can tell that it's true off your experiences, right? You could say it's anecdotal. It's not axiomatic. You're not saying it is necessarily true without any experience to verify it. You're saying like, I can tell you like, not just based off my experience, but based off what people understand like the genders or the sexes, whatever, biological sex to be right, that just obviously would be the case. You know what I mean? Like intuitively, if you understand this, right? So one of the things is if you understand the basic ideas in a domain, then the rational implications or intuitions you have of what the conclusions might be tend to line up.
Basically,
So
like an axiom would be like something that's like fundamentally true. Like, so in math, right? Like, I can prove, you can do a proof that a squared plus b squared equals c squared for a right angle triangle sides ABC. You can prove that, right? But if I say, prove to me that a plus b is always equal to b plus c, like that's an axiom, right? Like you can't prove that for all natural numbers or whatever. Like you have to just say that's just true, and then we work off that, and then go on and do all this other fun math stuff.
Well, technically that's based off the axioms, but yeah.
Yeah, I could. There's the only axiom I could think of off the top of my head. But like math has axioms that they just say this is something we can't prove.
That particular statement is axiomatic, but the axioms involved there would be the law of identity and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, an axiom is like the starting point. It's like the bit at the bottom.
It wouldn't even necessarily be. It would be even before saying like, okay, men and women react in this scenario. It's like, well, and the axiomatic belief is men and women.
Yeah. The axiom is like there is such a thing as a man and a woman. And here is what they are for the purposes of you reasoning about them.
Yeah. Okay. I get that.
This idea that you can't perceive like an object, or that your perception might be manipulated. I think there's a flaw. I think there's a flaw in that. And the flaw, or like the possible opening, can be explored as you eventually, or like you build a model where you start understanding the universe, or like you create various machines that start recording everything that happens. So you reach a certain technological level where you can record everything that happens, and if the illusion that you're kept inside of, if the simulation that deludes you into thinking what you're seeing is so complex as to continue to evade your instrumentation, then it's equivalent to an actual universe, like at the limit.
Sure, but I think the point is that you can never quite know that it actually is an actual universe.
Like you couldn't know that the machine is actually recording something. You couldn't know that what you see when you play back the recording is actually what it recorded. Like there's like if you want to, like you can keep going on and on and on about how you can't.
I'm not sure you can.
Know these
Is
things.
that not absurdism?
Because one of
that's skepticism.
I'm not sure you can, because one of the machines that you can create is what if you create an AI that gains consciousness and yet maintains full awareness of itself? And then yes, you will never know, but your creation will know.
That seems like a reach at that point. And I think the point is that, like, as far as we understand knowledge, this kind of knowledge is not possible.
And you would have to trust your senses that you're actually building an AI. And, like you'd have to trust that you're actually building something meaningful and not actually just, banging a bunch of rocks together, so to speak, that, seems to give you an answer, but could be saying
That's
nonsense.
a funny way to put it. Banging a bunch of rocks together.
I don't understand how that deals with like multiple entities.
No, it's just like it's hardline Cartesian skepticism. The idea is you cannot, like, to rely on evidence, you have to first make the assumption that the evidence is reliable.
Yeah, but that's fine.
There is no.
But such people, I guess the only defense against that, and I understand that at this point, and you can always question everything. The problem is that when such a person emerges, you can just dismiss them out hand. They just self-defeated, pretty much.
Well, that's not necessarily true. Because
wait.
Sorry,
they can't have a conversation though. nothing they say is relevant.
Oh yes. Well, I mean,
They have destroyed the basic foundation for having any sort of discussion.
look, I think that's probably true, but I also think that I'm sure you've heard Midnight call me a presup dude, and that's because I do the presuppositional technique is exactly that sort of questioning to get to the basis of an understanding, and I wouldn't say that when I'm doing it I'm destroying the basis for conversation, because I think I have a basis for the conversation. I just don't think that other people do, and that's essentially what you're getting at when you're asking about how they ultimately know things. You're asking about how they justify their idea of justification, because unless someone can tell you that, they're never really making sense in the end, because they don't even know what sense means.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
You
fine,
can
but
skeptic.
everybody is a presup at that level. In order to answer your question, presuppositions are made.
Sure, but I think
Right.
that there are better presuppositions and worse presuppositions.
Yeah, so you can you can be Cartesian skeptic and then say, okay, so we can't know anything. Now, moving on from that, we're going to have to recognize that we make these presuppositions, and I'm going to tell you what mine are, and I'm going to ask you what yours are, and we're going to compare to see if either of those seem to make more sense, or if we have any presuppositions in common that we can then use to question our other presuppositions.
Mm-hmm. And specifically, the guy who came up with Cartesian skepticism, Descartes, immediately proposed the counterposition, which is a foundationalist approach, right? And if you hear Midnight talk about how he deals with it, he just takes a foundationalist position. He just says some things are just foundationally true. They are basic facts, and you can't deny them. And I'm happy with that. But the point is that I don't understand how he justifies what ones he puts in that category of basic facts. Right?
I don't know why you're isolating him. Everybody does that.
No,
to
not
some
everybody
extent.
does that. That's not true.
Everybody either does that or they're lying.
That isn't true.
I don't understand why it isn't true.
Because I don't do that. I know what my axioms are, and I have a justification for them. I certainly don't say that they are just true for no good reason.
I think that's minimizing the reasons that other people give their own presuppositions.
Well, I'm telling you,
most people take presuppositions that without them you can't have a conversation, and for them that's enough.
But there are more basic presuppositions and less basic ones, and the most basic ones are the most fundamental ones, the most important ones. And if you compare the most fundamental assumptions, the most fundamental axioms necessary for existence, not for a conversation, to someone who's picked the most necessary axioms for a conversation, then yours are ontologically prior and more influential in every conversation, therefore.
No, I understand that can be possible.
And that's what I think is true. I think there are certain assumptions that are ontologically basic.
Okay. And by the way, this type of pointless talking around this stuff, I consider it a bit pointless from my perspective. Is why I originally had the deist tag, because I realized I looked for all the possible presuppositional beliefs or belief systems. I found the most vague one that can support my participation in any conversation and debate, and I just picked it. And there's no way for most other presups to tell me that I'm wrong. Therefore, I just found it to be a useful tool. Now I just think it's like a giant waste. So we're going away and away from things that affect our lives directly.
Well,
I think that's kind of dismissive personally, but sure.
Well, no, this part of the conversation is actually where I like this, that it's actually come here, because I borderline walk the same perspective that Tennant does in that situation, but I'm aware for the sake of dialectic, rhetoric, or even just being able to be certain in my own beliefs, I've recently chosen to engage in these types of the conversation more, and actually engaging in the the questioning the shit that we assume. What's the point in going?
Well, look, here's what I'll say. just quickly, is that I would say, Tenet, I would agree with you for most people. Most people are wasting their time. But I don't think that I often waste my time when I'm talking about this sort of thing. I don't think I'm wasting my time. I think that I tend to get to the bottom of the matter, and I tend to bring the other person along with me.
Okay.
And I think that ultimately the dismissive attitude, it detriments your ability to observe that because you're not interested. You lose your attention, like wanes, as soon as we approach anything that I could teach you in that area.
So, could I possibly frame this then in a way that might be more intriguing to Tennant? Because we
Sure.
have very similar perspectives on, let's say, the state of existence, as it were. And I was thinking about earlier when this whole initial conversation started. You brought up the idea of is something? I'll probably phrase this wrong, and you can correct me. Something is allowed because God allows it, or
is something good because is something loved by God because it is good, or is it good because it is loved by God?
Okay, so that right there, the first thing that statement makes me think of is it immediately like supersedes the idea of a Christian notion. What a Christian notion of God.
Just what you just said to me just reminded me. Actually, I used to have this sort of perspective about argumentation, and specifically reading that first book of The Last Days of Socrates was like a sort of like a life-changing experience for me, because I saw for the first time that it was actually possible to use that kind of structure to get to the bottom of something very complicated, right? That question's very complicated. Is something good because it's loved by God, or is it loved by God because it's good? That seems like impossible to solve. It seems like you'd be wasting your time. But Socrates shows that you're not wasting your time because he gets to the bottom of the matter. It is undeniable that the other guy is not making sense, and it seems like he knows it. You know what I mean? So like... That's
okay. Yeah. No. So I see what you're saying. My use of that scenario was actually completely different. I was just using that to frame my next statement. But exactly, so that helps solidify your point for why you consider these ideas actually worth discussing, the validity to the conversation. The idea that. So when I approach a lot of the conversation of like rationalism versus, or the different epistemological approaches, let's call it that, as I always frame them in the dynamic of Christians arguing with atheists, because that's how I was introduced it in terms of like internet debating, and then the very basic elements of it. I grew up in a Catholic school, etc. And if you're framing it, when you said that Socrates question, it immediately made me want to dispel the notion of that atheist versus theist version of that debate, because the theists have used a form of epistemology to rationalize, I guess, rationalism or some sort, to rationalize their ideas into like, okay, I can prove this with words and make this make sense, but there's still a part of it that like it's lacking to be like there's an element in which they haven't really backed up where they're getting their evidence from.
They're getting it from the presupposition that they've been divinely inspired.
Yeah.
And
revelation, am I right?
The revelation, sure. And when you ask them for specifics, basically the way you counter such a precept, in my opinion, is you don't have to like do any effort. You can be completely passive, and I think the problem of most atheists when they engage such people, like when Sam Harris had the debate with Lang, and Lang kept asking me questions. He kept trying to prove to Lang that his theory was superior, that he had the right idea. And that makes him vulnerable, because Lang naturally asks, how do you justify your positive claim about this or that? And then you start having to justify it, and you get into this, like I said, like you mentioned, the infinite regression and other issues. And it becomes unnecessarily complicated. So maybe you have a way to answer him in that debate, fine. But a much easier approach is to just like not engage in making strong positive claims. Like you can answer that I don't know, or you can answer that I might be incoherent, and I just have to be convincing to be effective.
What's wrong with Craig's response to the Euthyphro dilemma?
No, it's not wrong. It's just that the person that he debates normally opens himself up to questioning unnecessarily, because like an atheist fundamentally says that God does not exist. Oh, it's a positive claim, prove it. Whereas if you're just agnostic, recognize that there is evidence for either, and you're not, and then
Right,
you
but
have to.
I mean, if God or something like God exists, then it has a nature. So why is that not a good response to the Euthyphro dilemma?
Oh shit! This is gonna go way sidetracked.
Well,
This isn't the point of this. We're presupposing God does it. We're presupposing the inferiority of the Christian God for the sake of this conversation.
Am I
All right,
right?
forget it. I just jumped in the middle. I'm trying to understand.
I don't know what
know.
he's referencing, and I don't want to segue too hard. So
All right, that's fine.
Yeah, you guys can address it for a quick second, but I'm gonna pull it back. I'm just pointing that out.
you can
All right.
pull it
Well, I
back.
mean,
So in sync and ten here, like that's the idea. Is like when you frame that conversation around the way Socrates presented it, I'm just going to say it seems superior. It seems to have a conception of God that is more in line with like the naturalistic view. I believe would be the right phrasing of it. It's just something is the way it is because of like the physics of the universe. Like it's allowed to happen. Therefore, an element of it can be good, or if it's within the realm of possibility. And if you're if you're gonna have the conversation about that from there, like that makes sense to me in a political argument, and you can actually use it, but you have to completely kind of dispel that preemptive notion that like there's we're not going to use a book or ancient tablets or what's another tradition in any way to add validity to this belief.
Well,
We're going
Craig's answer to the problem of the Euthyphro dilemma has nothing to do with a book.
Well,
Can you identify that dilemma? Like, what are you mentioning?
Yeah, what's the Craig's dilemma? I don't even know what this is.
The Euthyphro dilemma is the thing that I said about piety. Is the thing about goodness and God,
Right, so I mean, unless by God you mean something without any content and without any meaning, like if God exists, then he has a nature. So of course it has to, whatever is good, it has to be incompatible with his nature.
Have you
whatever's good has to be compatible with his nature. But okay, so maybe I'm making this conversation in the wrong area. Once again, I'm doing this from a philosophy 101 approach, but I'm like dispelling certain notions in that idea of what would even be considered good, because like what can be considered good would result if we're going to define what's good without making some kind of appeal to an ancient tablet or a book or a script or tradition. You're going to end up in infinite regression.
That's epistemological. Like that's how we know about it. I'm saying ontologically, if God exists, then whatever God is the ultimate reality of existence. And so if it has a particular nature...
how did we get the face up here? That's what I want to know.
Wait. Before you go there, there is a text that I would like to mention, which is the Tao Te Ching or Tao Te Ching of Lao and Merrill's interpolation of it, where it describes not God like the Christian or like the traditional gods of humanity, but more as there is a way of the universe and everything else is an abstract, and
so
there's substance and there is abstract.
Are you not confusing what is good with what is?
Yeah. So in Lao Tse, it's a very interesting thing. He has many passages where he says there is some truth to the universe. He calls it the way. He describes some aspects of it, but it's ultimately unknowable by definition. And everything that you assert is some form of an abstraction. It's not the substance. So when you define beauty, you just define the ugliness. When you define good, you define bad. And because of that, he believes that all of those things do not belong to nature or to the way. They belong to humans and to positions.
He's kind of describing social constructs, the idea of identity being socially negotiated.
Mostly what he's describing is the idea of duality. And something else that's very interesting about the Tao Te Ching is that when you translate Tao or Tao. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah,
When you
Tao,
translate it, it translates a few different ways, right? Which is like the way, the path, the course of nature, and it is all these things at once, and it like involves connotations about recognition that the world that presents itself is more fundamentally made up of opposites, and that you have to be in balance with everything else if you want to succeed.
Okay, so real quick, 101 for a moment. When you refer to duality in this situation, you're talking the idea that like the physical being and consciousness can be
Opposites.
separate.
No,
Okay.
I'm talking about opposites, literally opposites. The idea of
opposites.
light and dark, heat and cold, everything that you can think of that's a quality of the world is opposed.
The way you describe it or perceive it?
It's in opposition, even
you're
more, most
building from the
fundamentally.
negative, as it were. It's in
No, 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 no,
opposition.
no.
Oh wow, I feel like I sorry, I
No,
don't
it's
even.
like yin yang, dude. So like everything
yeah.
is contrast to force.
But I feel like I'm rejecting this already intuitively.
Polarity. Okay,
What about-
polarity.
So
is a
there's
Before
no
you
existence
reject
of is there any existence of a gray area?
Check out what I linked and posted.
Do you know what the law of excluded middle is, classes?
The law of I don't know, but as a centrist, I feel like they're talking about me.
The
What
law
is
of
it?
excluded middle states that propositions are either true or false. There is no in between.
Oh, well, that makes sense to me too. Okay.
Yeah, and so like fundamentally, there is no like light and dark, heat and cold. There is no gray area. They sort of slide into one another, but the polarity is the most obvious thing.
Yeah. Okay.
If you look at the second passage, then you can see how they deal with this. It's
abstraction there.
All things are, and then the polarities are abstract. But one of the things they're trying to push forward in this philosophy is that as you abstract things, you kind of lose their meaning. You lose what they.
Yeah, I've heard of this concept before. I've studied this concept. I think it was either with Pluto or shit. I know I've studied that concept.
So the idea is that like for
no, sorry, it was either no. Who was the fucking guy after Plato? Aristotle. It was Aristotle, wasn't it? Anyways, this yeah. Sorry.
You're thinking of the golden mean, I think, right? Like how there's one thing and there's the opposite thing, and what you really have to do is sort of find the middle ground. Like there's courage, or like there's a foolhardiness, and there's like.
No, I was focusing more on the idea of when he was talking about as you abstract, you get further from the substance.
Yes, it's the idea is that how can you define it? For a person that's immersed in this way of thinking, there is no such thing as good or bad. There's just an experience. They're experiencing the world, and as soon as they start making value judgments, it leads to a sort of confusion according to this philosophy. So the idea that you even try to call something good or bad instead of just one experience versus another experience is strange, because
sounds very similar to elements of Stoicism.
Yes, it is. So Stoicism is kind of the Greek way of approaching life like that. I don't necessarily I don't know if this is like a consistent philosophy for human life, right? That's not necessarily but it's definitely a consistent philosophy for a Stoic approach to life, which is everything that you're going to do in life is going to muddy the waters of the universe in a sense. Your existence is already like an intervention, and your understanding and trying to abstract things is an intervention, because every time you meddle more, you create more of a mess. And
not if you're a determinist. So, like, I see what you're saying. Like, I agree with you, right? Isn't that like what's the word?
It might be opposed to determinism, sure.
But I know that there's a law that like the closer you study something, the more you actually change it, right? So it's harder. You can't study certain things to a certain extent, and So like that's the idea of like
No.
determinism
You can
is that like the perception of that would be a part of the actual event. as it
No,
were.
they don't reject the idea of experience in the universe or like studying it. They reject the idea of abstracting values about it without like recognizing that these are just abstractions.
Also, to be clear, it sounds like you're talking about the observer effect, and the observer effect doesn't occur proportionately to how closely you study something classless.
Well, no, I know, but like, sorry, I probably framed it wrong. Of course, I probably said it wrong. My terminology is very clearly off here.
Too good.
It's been so many years since I've taken philosophy seriously, like in an academic setting. So my language is definitely off.
Well, don't worry, you and
so-
Ten are both, am I right?
So yeah, but he's got an excuse. He's second language English. So if you're going to
Nah, he just doesn't like it. That's his excuse.
What don't I like?
philosophy.
The philosophers speak gobbledygook, as Stark Dawkins would say.
So if you're-
perhaps yes, yeah. This is why I kind of like efforts like Merrill's interpolation that I linked. It's translating something, extracting all the unnecessary cultural baggage out of it, and trying to make it as readable as possible for them. Obviously, there's risk involved. You can extract and clean up too much.
Don't you think that sometimes, like in some cases, the difficulty at accessing it is kind of like either inherent or is kind of the point, right? Like, it's like when people say, "Why don't you just dumb down Shakespeare?" Right? Well, it's like, well, because the point is that he uses this language and stuff, and that's part of the play. Or you don't say, like when you're talking about like in quantum physics. You could say, okay, give me a rundown of this, but at a certain point, you got to say, I can't simplify this to you because it requires, years of understanding science to actually get to this point,
Yeah, there's a balance.
yeah.
Shakespeare is actually a good point. So Shakespeare is not Hegelian. If you want to, if philosophical gobbledygook is what you want, read some Hegel or somebody that's like the worst thing for me is when I start talking and he says, I'm a bit Hegelian about this. I'm like, no, torture. And Shakespeare is not like that. Shakespeare has a specific language. And the reason why Shakespeare became so popular is because he spoke on so many levels. There is the face value of his language. Now, it seems like gobbledygook a bit to us because we're distanced by several hundred years. So our English is different. But if you immerse yourself into the period English, everything is fairly easy to understand what he writes. Now, the problem there's also a bunch of like mockery of the characters as they speak. They're not intended as like perfect individuals. They make mistakes. So yeah, I think Shakespeare is kind of not the best example for that, for incomprehensible language. It's a function of just history and just time passing.
Well, honestly, like I'm mostly going by Nietzsche because he's kind of the only one I've like properly read. But like his thing is very much like, I don't want to be someone that anyone can just pick up. I want someone to sit down and have to try to understand what I mean. And I know there's going to be some people that do, and they're
So I could It's funny. I was going to bring up Nietzsche as the next reference point to this, but he's an actual example of you need to have a high understanding of some concepts to be able to read them. Even the argument that I put forth earlier.
I think no. Honestly, you need to pay
You're gonna get
attention.
bogged down.
No. All you have to do, you don't have to have a good understanding of the concepts he's talking about, man. All you have to do is be willing to read a paragraph repeatedly when you don't understand it.
Yeah,
Because that's the thing about him, right? Is that the ideas are very nuanced and they're written very compactly, but you have to sort of puzzle over what the fuck he's saying. And I have a favorite quotation from Good and Evil that like demonstrates this really well. It's like 2 lines, and like me and one of my friends spent like over half an hour like just arguing about what it could mean, because like it's so unclear, right? But at the bottom of it there is something that he's saying.
What was it? You got it. Okay, I feel like that's not relevant. But you built me up.
No, I can tell you. It's whatever is profound hates masks. Whatever is most profound even hates image and parable. Sorry. What would be a better disguise for the shame of a god?
Okay, I can actually. It's very strange. I think I'm geared to understanding that because it's very similar to some of the things that Lao Tse. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
Lao Tse has like many passages where he says, when you get rid of this level of understanding, this next phase comes in. And when you get rid of that, this next phase, I think when he talks, let's say, about rituals, and some seems like a very similar statement. Like that. Let me see if it connects. I can read it.
I'm just gonna get like an actual quotation of it to make sure I'm getting it dead on.
Sure.
So the reason I was bringing up Nietzsche in regards to that is like there are certain elements, even if you're going to have your conversation with your average run-of-the-mill Christian, and you're pretty good at having that debate. You can sit there and disprove the Bible all day long from a historical perspective. Well, eventually, if that Christian or whoever's making that point is smart enough to shift the debate, or is aware enough to shift the debate into the realm of epistemology, then they can go into, well, let me dispel all your 5 senses and create my 6th sense and presuppose God and a bunch of things from there.
Mm-hmm.
If they're capable of, just the idea of doing that, like your average person isn't aware of the way to do that, isn't aware of the argument of how to walk themselves. There's the scripters who can and the people who are aware of it, but even at that, most people haven't thought that deeply on the concepts.
I didn't get the quotation quite right, and you really do need it right, so my apologies. So here's how it actually goes.
Can you also paste it?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Whatever is profound loves masks. What is most profound even hates image and parable. Might not nothing less than the opposite be the proper disguise for the shame of a god.
I feel like you have to read that multiple times to understand it.
Wait, so the first time it says loves, but the second time it says hates?
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. No, because I inserted a little bit of my understanding accidentally while I was trying to remember it.
Say it back one more time.
It's in Tavern Text Chat, but it goes...
Oh, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
What does the opposite refer to in this?
So the opposite of itself.
The opposite of the profound, the opposite of the most profound would be the proper disguise.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let me try. Let me give it a try. So
sure, yeah.
Things that are things that have basically a profound meaning, they're often hide behind masks. They have to be uncovered. Mm-hmm. But the things that are most profound, meaning they're at the core of things, actually don't like to be disguised by images and comparisons because they are some core true statements. And if you take the opposite of that, meaning obfuscation and like the ultimate math making and the ultimate parables and allegories, then you get a disguise for the embarrassment of gods for their being like false, basically.
No. But
Okay.
I'll tell you what.
Go ahead.
But I'll tell you what, Ted. I really like talking to you about textual interpretation stuff. The stuff that we share, like in terms of like liking poetry and stuff like that, is really cool. Yeah. So, does anybody else want to take a crack before I tell you what I think it means?
Is it kind of to do with like how I don't know, people like to have these profound things that like, you know, that you put like on like a wood board and you put it on your kitchen wall or something like that. Like, so, you know, the profound things, they seem to lend themselves to like these tiny quotes or whatever. But if you're really getting to something that's really profound, then it can't do that. Like, you can't do that. It has to be like explored in its profoundness, I guess, in a way.
No. So,
Dang.
yeah, of course about it. I'm just going to quickly give you a hint. So, the reason that the first two statements are linked in the sentence is because they are related. The first, like, there's a logical step between the two that sets up the second sentence. Give it a go, Zerado.
Nah, I'm gonna sound dumb.
No, come on. No, you won't. Give it a go.
No, it's fine.
No.
Profound loves a mask. That's fine. It's actually a nice.
No,
so
what
is the logical gate between them? The profound are both the same.
Yes.
Profound loves masks.
Okay, so
hates images. What's the difference between masks and images and parables? Aren't they
exactly
the same?
Well, no, but think about it, right? So why does what is profound love masks? But like by definition almost, right? Because what is profound is hard to understand, right? It is inherently hiding behind a mask.
Right.
The mask is your misunderstanding of it. And but what they're saying is that by nature, profundity likes to be masked. It doesn't like the mask itself. It likes to be masked, right? And then what is most profound is that, let's say, approaching the limit, as you were saying before, right? So what is that which loves to be masked approaching the limit? What's the limit of that? I knew it, Zerado.
I do.
Give me what you think, just from here.
Say again.
Yes.
Can you see that in text chat?
The limit is, well, the limit of the profound is like some absolute truth.
Is it? Do you know what profound technically means?
Let me see. Maybe I'm ESLing.
I think because of what is profound, we assume it means truth.
Well, actually,
that's exactly what I was going to ask when you first posted that quote. Profound confused me, and then you added the word most in front of it.
The other thing is the word parable. I also misunderstood. Parable is like is a simple illustration, or like a simplified moral lesson, which is an interesting choice.
Yes, it's a representation of something in the form of a story, right?
A simpler story, like easy to understand story.
Sure, but more importantly, the idea is that it's a lesson disguised as a story. So that's the definition of profound here, right? And so,
it's a great knowledge or insight. So, extending from great depth, very deep. Okay.
Yeah, very deep, right? And so, like, the deepest part is the hardest part to see, right? The most like, absolute things are the hardest to see because we live in the world of appearances, right? And so, the truths are masked behind appearances, and because because it's the depth, it is inherently masked, like by nature, right?
Right.
And then, as it approaches the limit of being deeper and more profound, what happens is he's saying that the most profound thing loves to be masked so much that it hates even being represented at all. It doesn't like to be pictured or represented at all, right? And then he links those two ideas to the thing he says about the shame of a god. So if God was the most profound thing, then he would be ashamed of being known. And so there's two ways to interpret this, as far as I can tell. One of the things that Nietzsche is saying here is he's saying, if there were such a thing as God, and God were the most profound thing, then God would not exist, for otherwise he could be known, and that would be shameful.
Yes. It's
Yes.
very similar. Again, it's actually very similar to the first paragraph in Lao Tse, where he defines abstraction, and I can scroll up and quote from it. But no, when he defines the way, it basically, and I can just change a few words. The profound thing that can be experienced is not true. The world that can be constructed is not true. And the profound manifests all that happens and may happen, and the world represents all that exists and may exist. So, but if you go from that to your statement, then I understand it. It's basically, if God would have existed and it's the most profound, it is the way, then just by the fact that we know that it exists, it's already like a lesser.
Exactly.
Maybe.
Yeah. And so like what I think is so interesting is that he managed to pack that into that little, that little line, dude. It's nothing. It's 2 sentences.
Now we can intuit that it might exist.
We were talking about Nietzsche, Clem.
Oh God.
Brought up the general idea of like whether or not there's a
No, Clam, not God.
Yeah.
Oh, wasn't Nietzsche the guy that said God is dead and we have killed him? Or something like that?
No.
Yes, but it doesn't mean what people usually think it means.
Yeah, he wrote that though.
As a side note,
he's implying, from what I understand, that it's not a good thing when he says that. And
No, but what does he mean when he says God is dead?
well, he means our sense of imagination, right?
No, he means our ability to believe in God. Through science, we have discovered God's corpse is the metaphor.
It's literally him. It's kind of him stopping and stating, "We've entered modernity."
Yeah. So like, it is no longer acceptable to say there is a God. The idea of God is dead, and we have killed him.
Okay. What book is that from? I want to read that book.
I believe it's from Thus Spake Zarathustra.
Yeah.
It was in, actually, I think it was in the Gay Science, and then he also mentioned it in Zarathustra.
So the way Peterson references that statement is fairly accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Is this one of the books I should read?
Oh, dude, you should read Beyond Good and Evil. I've read.
Yeah,
that's what that quotation I gave you just before was.
That was required reading in political philosophy university.
Really? That's awesome, dude.
Yeah. It wasn't until the second. So you had to take it. It was like a 2-part course. There was the introduction to political philosophy, and then like later political philosophy, and then Nietzsche was one of the required readings. So Beyond Good and Evil specifically.
Yeah,
wasn't fucking fun. That and The Republic. I never want to read that book again.
Fuck off, dude. The Republic's awesome.
So
you're a fucking Philistine, Glassless.
If I were to pull out, I could pull the book out right now, read a random quote from you, and show you how painful it is.
You are a Philistine.
Hold on, like this. I only keep this book because it's kind of like war wounds, But like, let me just read like a random fucking quote from this. All right, just like, all right. So let it be given, he said. And this is what went before are fine. But, Socrates, I think that about this sort of things, you would never remember what you previously in order to say all this. Is it possible for this regime to